Benes Bonito, Todo Espito, the digital download. Whoops, sorry. Bertrand was kind enough to have written it for me in Spanish, although obviously I butchered that. Can't deliver it with quite the panache that he does. So, good afternoon, good morning, good day, wherever you may be, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Digital Download. We are the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live. And we are globally syndicated on TuneIn Radio through the IBGR network, which is the world's #1 business talk, news and strategy radio network. Today, we're going to look at the art of building strong B2B relationships with our special guest star, Dr. Ryan O'Sullivan, author and expert in relationship-driven sales strategies. He has over 20 years' experience in academic research and is at the forefront of this thinking. He's also the host of the Deal Talk podcast and global account manager at Introhive. And he has a deep understanding of how important relationship building can be to transform business outcomes. So it looks like it's just you and I and Ryan today, Tim. So over to you. Introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. And welcome, everybody. My name's Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. And I'm famous for writing the book, Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers, which is the same publisher as Ryan has as well, Kogan Page.
Fantastic. Kogan Page, which is the same publisher that we have as well. Without
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so we're all like a big family, aren't we?
Yes.
So I'm Adam Gray. I'm Tim's business partner and co-founder of DLA Ignite. And this, I think, is going to be a really interesting conversation today because relationship building and the importance of building strong, long-lasting networks and relationships is fundamental to both what we do as a business and what we believe in. So without further ado, let's bring on Ryan. Hi, Ryan. Lovely to have you join us today. And welcome all the way from sunny Nice.
Bonjour, Ryan.
Bonjour, yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you guys. Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So before we go any further, do you want to introduce yourself and tell everybody that's watching how you got here and why this matters so much?
Yeah, well, you did a good version yourself there, Adam. I listened to your intro prior to that. So I guess to add to that, you mentioned 20 years. I think the most important part of that is probably the last 15 years. I spent nearly 9 years with Infosys, global IT services firm. So that's where I really cut my trade in the enterprise complex deals and managing key global accounts. So obviously these are very huge amounts of revenue that we're talking about. So that was the first time that in that field and understanding really the art and science of how these deals and how those accounts work. That's what prompted my intrigue, I guess, into people talk about relationships and relationship quality, but what is a quality relationship? You know, understanding the detail behind that. So I started my doctorate while at Infosys and I finished it and I moved over to the firm I'm currently at now, which is Introhive. And it was almost a serendipitous moment when I was wandering around the O2 and I saw their banner that said, in business, relationships matter. And that was really my ethos and linked to a lot of the stuff I was doing. And I was already working on my doctorate by then. And I had to stop by, obviously, and got chatting to them. And one thing led to another. They considered me a prospect before because I was working at Infosys, obviously. But I ended up joining them, which was a really great thing for me professionally and personally. And they have a software that helps to map relationships. And during the course of the 5 years of working here, I've worked on my book, and that's recently published at the back end of last year. So that was probably an 18-month endeavor, really focusing in on the specifics thing around identifying and mapping relationships. So that's really the area that I consider my specialty. I think there's a lot of people that are very well able to talk about the relationship building piece and trust and the rest of it. And obviously I've got my perspective there, but the uniqueness of this of identifying and mapping relationships is where I think there's a gap generally.
That's very interesting, and it would be great to delve into that a little bit. But the title that we have for the talk is Ditch Transactional Selling, Build B2B Relationships That Last. And it strikes me that in almost all of my interactions with organizations, they pay lip service to the importance of building relationships. They always want to have a relationship-based sale, but actually they don't want a relationship-based sale. What they want is a sale. So it often percolates down to being something which is purely transactional. So I guess the first question that I would like to ask is, if it's possible to map relationships and understand how well you are plugged into an organization and how you can get people to influence the decision making, why bother if as an organization you don't think that relationships are something that you should be focusing on?
Well, I think if you're coming at it from that premise, as you say, it's an interesting point there, Adam. So, I mean, my argument would be that relationships do matter, and the premise, if you're coming at it from that premise, then it's important to do all of that type of analysis and understanding. But if you are just trying to do a transactional sale, I would suggest that that's a dwindling business, especially in the enterprise level. So as we're seeing, it's very, very difficult to get sort of net new conversations going, net new relationships built. If you are basically blasting out content to try to hook someone to sell them something, it's never been as difficult as it is today. And I say that as someone who's fashioned his trade over 25 years in new business. So I would say that people that are thinking like that are going to have a bit of a pendulum swing back to, look, well, we need to understand what our clients are doing. We need to understand what their business is. We need to understand how we can support them with their challenges and opportunities. Only then can you have an opportunity to sit down and have a conversation. So it's a lot of that upfront work needs to be done. Otherwise, there's no chance to capture their attention. I think even back when I was researching for my doctorate, this is prior to COVID, I interviewed CXOs, very, very senior people from big global corporations, and I asked them about the best person they've ever worked with from the supplier or the vendor side. And they all immediately thought of someone, and we went through like what made this person so special versus the rest. And what we realized was that they weren't describing someone who they thought was a salesperson. They were describing someone that was a partner of theirs, that understood their business, that understood their challenges even before they did, and came to them with suggestions and ideas. So that's the pinnacle. And anything that's sort of deviating from that, I think, is deviating from what is required to satisfy very complex and high value clients and relationships.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. So from the notes that Bertrand had prepared, his first question that he wanted to ask was, why is identifying key stakeholders the first step to success in this process?
Yeah, well, I've got a story there, I suppose, and I've already told part of it, but I can finish it with my logical flow was, look, relationships matter. And I think nobody listening to this session today needs to be convinced that relationships matter, because they're using them and their networks every day. So whether it's personal or professional. So we all know that. And then I was going to, well, if relationships matter, what is a high quality relationship? But I think the gap there was, before you start to evaluate the quality of your relationships, are you talking to the right people based on the specific use case? And I mean, we can talk about business, we can talk about the priorities, you sort of map accounts, but even if you're looking for, on a personal level, you're looking to move jobs, you're looking for, we were just talking earlier about living in France or Italy. If you're looking to go on holiday somewhere, you need to identify who are the right people that can help you first. So identify them, and that's the mapping part. So identifying and mapping. And if you don't do that, you're really missing a trick, because you tend to gravitate towards the people who you already have relationships with, but they might not necessarily be the people that are important to the priorities that you have as an individual. And whether it's finding information about a trip to Tuscany, or whether it's understanding how you can develop a conversation with the head of data analytics to propose some services. So I think if you don't take that seriously and have that as the North Star with everything else you do, then it's going to be difficult.
Mm.
Because if you take Kerry Cunningham at Sixth Sense's research, one of the things that he's found that in large B2B enterprise sales, people will go away and do their own research, and then they're 70% of the way through the buying process, then they'll get in contact with the company. But part of that research will be using their relationships to say, I've got a short list of ABC company. I know Steve in A, and I know Geraldine in B, and I know Cynthia in C. And they ring them up and they say, so what's it like there? What are you doing? And how's it going? And so part of the research process is actually taking into account existing relationships. They don't ring salespeople. They ring people who they know will give them an honest answer. And it's interesting that Kerry actually has that in his research. So relationships and ongoing relationships are so important if we're to believe the data.
Yeah, and I think that scenario, you're talking about the other side of the table where they are leveraging their relationships before they go through the typical, the old, not even typical, the traditional sales cycle, you might say, which is the first thing they do is click on a request to hear from a salesperson. So yeah, that supports the whole ethos, I suppose, of networks and relationships are going to be even stronger. And I think the multi-threading piece comes in there, so it extends from that on the client side and then on your side.
So, but if you look out over LinkedIn, we're in a situation where nobody wants to talk to salespeople. And what they do is that they put up as many barriers. It's not just about having someone to stop phone calls coming through. It's to stop the emails, even spam coming through on LinkedIn, etc. Nobody wants to talk to salespeople. But the conversation that we see on the sales side on LinkedIn is how they're turning to manipulation to get to get in front of people, whether that's using ChatGPT or the latest hack or whatever that's going to get through to people. Then if they actually get through to people and actually have some level of conversation, I think just the fact that someone's spoken to you, that's now probably deemed as being a relationship. Whereas if someone's not ghosting you, then you must have some, if you can pick up the phone to somebody. But what is your definition of a relationship?
Well, yeah, I think in that scenario, a relationship is a two-way communication. So, I was on a panel recently, and we talked about one of the early mistakes I made, or that was the question to the panel. One of the mistakes you made early in your career, and one of the mistakes I made was thinking that if you liked each other and appreciated each other, that was a relationship. And it may well be two people that appreciate each other's time and find, pleasure in spending time together, whether it's grabbing a coffee or lunch or whatever. But is it a business relationship? So I'd like to distinguish between having a relationship, which is two people that enjoy each other's company, and having a business relationship. And a business relationship is very different, especially at an executive level. So this is about, back to what I said about the doctorate, this is about understanding their priorities and being able to help them solve their problems. That's when you're elevating or differentiating yourself from the others. And you may, and like I say, the example I gave early in my career, I may well be meeting senior people, and the mistakes I made is that I assumed that because we were meeting and we were having pleasant experience, that was a relationship. but I completely missed the point. It was almost an escape for him from his day-to-day life to meet and have a pleasant conversation. And then he goes back into it. I wasn't understanding his business and aligning what I could do to solve his problem. So I think a lot of people slip into that, whether it's the small talk or the rapport building, and you can find some commonalities, and that's great. But it's a very different scenario when you need to be understanding their business and driving change for them, and them bringing you into their team. It's not a salesperson and a supplier relationship. It's, look, I've got this problem and I need to solve it. That's, the famous what's keeping me awake at night, even though you should never ask that question. But this is what people want from someone, and that's when it transcends into a real, what I would call, business to business relationship.
And the key thing about a salesperson, as you always know, is that they have a credit card. So you know that if you're talking to a salesperson, they'll usually either buy you a coffee or lunch. So
exactly, yeah.
But isn't it the case, though, that you have to have that I enjoy spending my time with you bit first? So, the rapport building is crucial, because every person that has a potential solution to my problem will ask me questions like, although they won't use this expression, of course, what's keeping you awake at night? What are your big challenges? What are the 5 things that you need to change this year? Whatever the the questioning route they choose to go down. And most people who are senior in organizations have got people queuing out the doors that want to ask them this question in order that they can map their solution to this person's problems.
Yeah.
So isn't the first step still as it always used to be? I actually quite like you, therefore I'm going to give you some of my time. We share a passion for football or guitars or whatever it may be, and that's the basis on which we get to know each other. And then when we've got to know each other, I'm more likely to listen to you when you speak and believe what you say.
Yeah, precisely. So back to the doctorate research, there's a thing I called in my thesis called mutual disclosure. So it's this stage between you don't know someone and you trust each other. So there's something magical needs to happen, and you're starting to describe it there, Adam. And when I did the analysis from all the people I interviewed, the thematic analysis, so these were the themes that were there across all of those interviews. There were 3 things, and 2 of them sort of not to do's, and 1 of them was required. So the first one was do not sell, believe it or not. So yeah. When they were describing the people they wanted to build a relationship with, they do not want to be sold to. Mm. So, and we know that ourselves. I mean, we're all salespeople, but we know when someone's trying to sell to us and you have a rejection of it. So that's very difficult. And I think a lot of people struggle breaking that down, that barrier. The second one was not to do as well, clash of personalities. So they talked about, look, sometimes people don't click. And if you don't click, there's not much you can do about it. So if you understand that going in to a relationship and you can understand their personality dynamics, you can maybe do some social profiling. You can adapt the language and communication style to suit them slightly, so you can overcome that one. And the third one was having some type of knowledge to offer. So whether it's sort of industry expertise or whether you're at work, you're a junior person on a project that's important to them, to understanding the detail about what's happening, the specifics. So some type of knowledge or value proposition for something that's relevant to them. So that's where you've got to link it to a problem or a priority that they have. So when those 3 things were present, you enabled the opportunity for the relationship to come. And of course, rapport building's there. Nobody's saying any different, but you need to do that. But that alone, what doesn't justify a real business relationship, whether we want, when I did those interviews, we would all like to be described as the person these executives were describing, and it's very difficult, obviously, to get to that level, but that's really what the pinnacle of what a relationship is. And I think it starts with the rapport building, and I think a lot of people are good at that. But you can, if they can sniff out that you're trying to sell to them, you've lost them. And I think a lot of people fail there. And I don't have the answer to like the secret formula to avoid that, I'm afraid. But I think we all know when it's being done to us, and we've all seen it in action. And it's a very difficult dance to play.
Absolutely. I mean, that do not sell idea is something that we say quite a lot to people. When we're teaching people how to create content or how to develop a conversation with somebody in the digital space, as soon as you start selling, it's like me proposing to you and I've only just met you. It seems massively inappropriate. We might end up married, but actually there's a few steps between now and then. And actually, this idea that you must wait until it's appropriate to have that conversation. So we need to identify key stakeholders. But one of the challenges, I think, again, shown up from Kerry Cunningham's research, is that one of the challenges that we're facing today is that there are an awful lot of people involved in the buying decision-making process. There's a bunch of people that are the key stakeholders and the decision makers. So the CFO, the head of procurement, those kind of people. There's a whole load of people that are on the face of it, the technical experts, if you like. So, we need a new CRM system, therefore we need to talk to the head of sales, and we need the head of process and head of whatever. And then there's a whole bunch of people that are from the outside looking in, kind of pretty much invisible. So I don't have a role that means that I'm an expert on CRM, but I've sat through 6 CRM systems being implemented at other companies. So actually, we should call him into the meeting to have a conversation as well. And there's a bit of that going on. So how do we cast the net wide enough to try to capture all of these people, but not cast the net so wide that we're talking to everybody in a 5,000 person company that we want to sell our product or service to? How do we strike that?
Well, I've got a short, medium, and long answer to that one. I'll try and sort of combine it together. But I think when I talk about mapping, I'm talking about this, say, from a prospect account level. So this is an account that we've identified as relevant for our portfolio. We would like to do business with them. You've got a deal sort of level. So you've got maybe an RFP coming, or they've got some type of request from the client. So that's more like a deal. And then you've got your typical account management movement. And I think the account management and the prospect account is a bit similar in my approach, which is you need to identify who the key buying personas are across all of your service lines. So if you're looking at an account without any opportunities, you're just saying, look, let's assess the opportunity here for us to do business. I'll give you an example. We just done some analysis for a big US bank, and they've got literally hundreds of thousands of employees on LinkedIn. We've done that analysis across their 12 service lines, identified the key buying personas for each of their service lines and all the executives that are relevant across those service lines, like the CIO, CTO, CEO, different regions. And we distilled it down to 312 stakeholders that are relevant in this, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of persons company. So that's where you can distill down to the right people to have a conversation with about your service line and your proposition. And obviously then you're doing some analysis about what are the right service lines, look at the business context, doing other stuff we've already talked about. But then when you get into a deal cycle, which is, I think, where you were coming at this from, Adam. So then you kind of run into like all the other people that are involved. So you would have the typical, the different 3 layers that you described there. So I suppose the key part is to get someone as a champion. And I think if I look at the deals I analyze, even in the book that I think you've read, Tim, I talked through some case studies there, and there's been many others that I didn't write about. The one common theme to all successful deals is a champion or champions on the client side. If you don't have something like that, it's very difficult to navigate your way around. And I think to answer some of the questions about the hidden executives or the processes or all the other stuff and who's fighting for you, the competitive landscape, not that people are disclosing anything confidential too much, but it's also, if you don't have someone fighting, guiding and advising on the inside, it's very tough to win, and they would give you access and insight into what's happening. But also what they will do is they will navigate the way around for you to connect to those relationships. And I'll finish with two more points. One is that if you don't have people like that are willing to work with you to help connect you, it's very difficult. But if you do, it's so much easier to get access to the right people when it's coming from someone inside the organization, rather than you leveraging your network, which I evangelize, but someone, a warm introduction. So, but it's still outside in. The key is to have people on the inside that are willing to support you. And on this same example I gave for the US bank, this is a prospect account, and they didn't really have any relationships. And we've done that analysis, and we managed to figure out that this is a big IT services firm. They actually had 120 something people that currently worked for them that used to work at that bank. So they've got immediately, not everyone's relevant. Some of them left 20 years ago, but a good bunch of them are C-level or senior in the current supplier firm, but used to work there. So they are a great avenue in. And then the contrary. So you've had over 1,000 people that used to work at their firm and now works in the target organization. And you start to do that analysis, and then you see who from your firm can connect with their ex-boss or their ex-colleague. And look, this is what we're trying to do. We've identified those stakeholders, and in this scenario, I think 30% of them were in one city in the US, and I think 60% were in 4 cities in the US of those 312 stakeholders. So you're starting to piece this together and be able to be very strategic and think very differently to the traditional model. And that is really what I'm trying to evangelize. And I call it the panning for gold stage. So I said I had a short, medium, and long answer. I think that was the long one. So.
No, that's brilliant. But I am concerned that for people that are in the sales organization, this sounds very complicated. It's like, well, previously what we've done is we've got a list and we've sent emails, and you would imagine that in 2025 that wasn't the norm, but it still is the norm.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do is we're going to use AI or automation to send hyper-personalized emails, and we're going to make sure that we get you on LinkedIn and on your mailbox and on Facebook, and we're going to do some Google partner ads to you all at the same time, so you can't get away from us, because that's going to be even more attractive, isn't it? But what you're talking about there is significantly more sophisticated. This is like saying, okay, there's a big group of us. Some of us came from there. Some of them have come here. Let's look at those connections and how those plug into both organizations, and how we can start to take advantage of those relationships that already exist. And everybody that you worked with 20 years ago, you have nice feelings about them, because we've all got rose-tinted glasses most of the time. But I think that for many, particularly enterprise organizations, where there's a very rigid sales structure and there's a very much quarter by quarter driven revenue requirement, this sounds like it's incredibly complicated. It's not good use of your time, because we need something which is going to land this week or this month. And I guess in many instances, Tim and I come from Oracle, 200,000 person company. Like, there's an awful lot of people in Oracle that have come from the companies that we're trying to sell to, and vice versa. And even identifying those people would be a gargantuan nightmare. So how do organizations take these first steps to make this doable rather than just a nice idea?
Yeah. So I hear you, and I think about my time back at Infosys, and I was in the new business team, and what I would do is draft an email, relevant email, do a bit of what you would call today sort of personalizing it, and send out maybe 20, 25 emails to specific people. I'd get 5 to 10 come back. That would turn into 5 meetings, and over the course of the next 6 to 9 months, I would open up, one of those accounts, and that was very straightforward. And I know from experience in the market that today that has just drastically changed, and you're sending thousands of emails and no one's responding. So it's a very, very different dynamic at the moment. And I think what I would say is I don't have a great answer to like a silver bullet. What I would say is 80% of the revenue tends to come from 20% of the salespeople. That's what I used to do previously, and that was successful to me. I've had to move with the times. That wouldn't work for me now. I've tried it. I tell you, it doesn't work. So you've got to do something different. And I think that with the advent of AI, the advent of automation, this ease of getting access to our target personas is only going to get more and more difficult. Like Tim was saying, that the gates have gone up. They're doing their own research. They're coming to you when they're ready. So that's what's happening in the background. It's invisible to you. So if you want to take control of your own business, I think you've got to put the hard work in. And what I did before was the hard work. And I think this type of analysis and this type of mentality to leverage what I would call intelligence gathering versus research, because everyone's got their own. I mean, the AI can now create very personalized content research. It sounds great, but nobody's reading it because they're getting so much of it. So now I would argue the last bastion is intelligence and leveraging relationships. And it's not warm introductions. This is what I talk about. Warm introductions are great. They're tough, but if you could, and they're usually to senior people. I can see you're connected to the CFO or CXO. Can you introduce me? That won't work. So you've got to go to more junior, so-called junior people for the intelligence gathering about what the dynamics are, who else they're working with, pitch to them maybe, and work your way up. So I think that is the strategic way to do it. But I think it is practical as well, because anyone with the tools available today, even with a basic LinkedIn license, you can start to do that type of analysis. Obviously, with software like Introhive, it makes it a lot easier because we're analyzing the internal relationships and capturing all of that. So that's easier. But I think there's no easy answer to get the pipeline firing for quarter by quarter deals. And I think we're seeing that across the software market. It's never been more difficult. And I think the sales, that shift from a sales pitch for the impact that the software will have has sort of faded since COVID. And now it's very much proving the value, and a lot more questions are being asked about the impact that the software has had or will have. And questions are being asked from exactly the way Tim described. So before people are making decisions, they're already gathering whether this is the right move for them. So there's no happy answer, I'm afraid, from my side to make this easy and suddenly get the deals and the pipeline going.
Yeah, I mean, we don't believe in silver bullets, and we're forever writing about the fact that there's no easy fix for any of these issues. It all boils down to hard work. But it strikes me, when I say me, I mean us, that every person in sales didn't go into sales to get 50% of their number. They all went into sales to be successful and earn a really good salary. Although humans are hardwired to be lazy, i.e. take the easiest course of action, salespeople are no lazier than anybody else. They work hard. They work late into the night. They carry a huge amount of stress. They're very used to dealing with rejection and all of the things that come with that. So we're assuming that they're committed to the company. They've got great industry or product knowledge. They're working really hard. They're cranking the handle on their machine as hard as they possibly can, and they're still failing. So what are the mistakes that organizations are making that they're not able to leverage this? Because, with LinkedIn, as you said, you've got access to every person that's employed in a B2B role on the planet at your fingertips. So it should be making things easier. But actually, the world's a much more difficult place than it was for you 25 years ago. So what are companies doing wrong?
Well, I think, you've just touched on a couple of points where, and I'll come back to what I said earlier, which is the differentiator from the good versus the average, or the Pareto rule. And you give the example, and you go back to your Oracle days, I'm sure it was the same, that 20% of the people were delivering 80% of the revenue. So they were doing something different. You know, they're not magical. So with the advent of AI and automation, is basically making it easier for the rest to do what you were doing, because they can personalize, and they basically looked at what the good people were doing and helped you do that in an easier way. But it's then made it obsolete, in effect. That's what I'm seeing. And so you need to think differently. And if you've got companies that are looking to solve this problem, I think, I mean, I'm obviously biased, but I would just go back to the human element of the relationship side. And I know this is the stuff that you talk about as well as a differentiator. When you're trying to build net new relationships, people are looking to have a personal connection, at least, with someone on that level, and that's the rapport piece and the matching of sort of personality styles, if you will, or at least interests, to be a catalyst for something else. And people will always help people if they don't feel that they are being used or this is some part of a transaction. And I think we're all human. So how we can leverage that. So I guess again, it's not a great answer that will solve world hunger, but I think it's really a case of using the human element to try to do the best you can and build relationships with the right people in the right way. And again, back to doing the hard work, unless you've got such a great product with such a great market fit, with such a great content and messaging that they are figuring this out for themselves and the leads are coming in. I mean, that is the ideal scenario. That's the promise of a great and effective marketing strategy, tied with social media elements where you're posting stuff and people sort of get that. You build a profile online and people buy into that, and then they're coming to you because you've built that trusted persona about a specific problem statement. And then you've got some people coming to you as they're getting into the deal cycle, because we do see that. I mean, there's another stat, isn't there, around like only 3 or 5% of the people you ever speak to are actually in the market to buy anything at that particular time. So 90+% of them, it's not even the right time for them to buy. So hitting that sweet spot, I think, is key. And I'd argue marketing, the right marketing strategy combined, or including social media, persona-based, and building a persona linked to the trust and market problem to generate leads from at a mass scale would probably be the right way to go.
Yeah, I mean, we often kind of wrestle with this, you know, the idea that so few of the people that are out there that appear to be a good fit for you are actually in market to buy at the moment. And that's why that don't sell thing is so important, because we've all been chased around the room by a salesperson that's trying to grab hold of us and wrestle us to the ground. And actually, when that happens and you don't buy because either you don't want to or you're not able to at that moment, you never want to engage with that person again. So yeah, the point of being friendly and approachable and helpful and generous with your time means that you're much more likely to get a conversation at some point down the road. But I think what you said about, you know, the 80-20 rule, 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your team. So you look at the 20%, you see, what are these people doing that are outperforming? And then we'll get everyone else to do that. What happens is it's still the same 20%, even when they're all doing what on the face of it seems to be the same thing. It's still the 20% that are doing it, because they either are better at building trust, better at building rapport, better at engaging people in conversations, better at listening, whatever those skills are that they kind of inherently have. But an interesting question is that what you described is potentially a longer path to sell something, but it's a more sustainable path to sell something because more people stay on the journey. So as a business, in between me starting behaving this way and me starting to reap the benefits of behaving this way, I need to have some things that measure the fact that I'm on the right path, that I've got more people engaged, that I've got more people listening to me, that I've got more people having conversation. So how do I measure the ROI of the salespeople or the customer facing people's relationship building efforts? Because that sounds like that's a bit airy fairy, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think hard metrics would be meetings. I think that's a good one, isn't it? So are you meeting these people? And emails, not so much, but definitely meetings. And I know a lot of, obviously the clients I deal with, that is sometimes a metric that they use. But then one that you often see, I mean, I know one of the big global consulting firms we were joking recently about, they understood that and they did a campaign to say, look, we want to get people out meeting people. And what people did is when they realized it was a KPI, they just went and met the people they already knew. So let's just go out and say, right, I need to make 10 meetings. I'll go and meet these 10 folks I know. So they can game the system that way. But the point is, if you're meeting people, that's good. But new meetings. So that's another dimension on the same thing. Which people are you meeting for the first time? And again, you can say, well, it's hard to meet people for the first time. And it is if you're cold call, if you're blasting emails and cold calling, but through your existing network. Again, I'd go back to that. So I think those two would be a good lead indicator as to like what are people, and then you can see who are they meeting, what's the profile, what happened in the meeting. So that would be a good one. Number of meetings, a number of new meetings, and then analyzing where they fit in the ICP and the typical buying personas.
Yes. So, sorry, go on, Tim.
I was going to say what you were saying earlier on, Ryan, was about going out and doing research in terms of who are the people that you need to contact. And I think everybody will do that regardless of whether you're going to spam them or call them. Then there's going to be some sort of process where you're going to try and get conversations in the account and because it may be in a situation where the people don't even know they have the problem. So from a new business perspective, you know, Kerry Cunningham comes from, well, I already know that I have a heart problem. Whereas you may be in a situation where you need to go and tell the person that they've got a heart problem, and they actually don't know it yet. So as you go through that process of talking to people and that, in the book, you actually start talking about mapping out the people, don't you? And actually doing that physically on a piece of paper or on a PowerPoint slide. Why would you do that?
Well, I suppose that's even easier. If you've got a solution that you think is relevant to a specific industry and key buying persona, through LinkedIn, you can find the exact people you need to talk to pretty much globally, regionally, vertically, however you want to do it. And that's back to what I already mentioned, which is now you've got the exact people. So how do you get to them? So you want to have a conversation with them. You can send them a LinkedIn message. You can send them a cold email. You can cold call them, or you can be like the chestnut checkers aspect is what I describe. So now you know who they are. You can do a bit of research on them, the company. And if you've got a compelling proposition and maybe you've delivered it to a peer of theirs in the market, you've got a case study, you can start to make some content like that if you wanted to sort of build up a bit of a social presence about that specific problem. But also you'd be then leveraging the intelligence gathering aspect that I described, is like, who do you know in the organization that can get you to that person? And what I would suggest, and I mean I do this often, is of course you can send them a LinkedIn request and a message, but when I'm talking strategy to clients, we would spend maybe 3-4 months to get to that one person. And it does take that amount of time, and you get to them in the end, but you get a very compelling conversation, because by the time you get there, you may have spoken to 2 or 3 people in the organization or more and in their team and have a very comprehensive understanding of their business. And by the time you walk in the door, they're already aware of who you are and why you're there, and they're thanking you for your time, rather than here's another salesperson trying to pitch to me. So again, it always defaults back to the same story, which is try to slow down to speed up.
But in the book, you talk about actually sitting down and mapping that out, don't you?
Yeah.
So why would you sit down and map that out? I totally understand what you're saying about going to people, and that can be difficult to actually, it can be a campaign just getting to an individual. But why would you sit down and map that out?
Well, because you need a North Star, don't you? If this is your strategy, and you say if you're running a campaign for this specific solution against a bunch of accounts, so for each, whether you're mapping it out at an account level, you know where that person who you want to talk to sits in the organization, who else sits within their team, who else you know. So you start to build that profile. What I would suggest in that scenario is if you've got a list of various different companies that fit the profile, you would map out who the people are and where their existing relationships are to prioritize which ones you target first. So that would then help you to understand these are going to be a bit easier for me because there are already some existing relationships in that ecosystem that we can leverage to get into that organization. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, that's the purpose of the mapping, is to have that understanding. And then if you are serious about it and you've got a campaign being run at an organizational level, when you're transmitting your progress internally, then you need the data points to articulate the process. So as we've said, there's a lot of pressure on success, but if there's no success, you need to justify by the process you're going through. And I think through that level of depth and analysis and preparation and execution, people will be confident in what you're doing and give you the more time to follow it through. Because I think if you aren't able, back to some of the stuff maybe Adam mentioned earlier, I'm connecting the dots a bit now. If you're under a lot of pressure to deliver and the results are hard to come by, you need to have a very structured approach that people can buy into and support, and then say, right, carry on, we're backing you on this. So
what you're saying, that if you're running a very big account, you need to map on paper or PowerPoint the people that you're talking to and where they fit in. And you do that not just because it's good for you to understand where things are, but because it's about your professionalism back into the company to show them that you actually understand what's going on.
Precisely, but also, you can't manage this in your head, can you? So whether it's an account as you're describing now, where you'd be taking multiple things, whether you're running a campaign to take a solution to the market, whatever the activity is you're running, you need to have a plan, and you need to structure the plan, and you need to be able to articulate the progress on the plan in various ways. And if it's all in your head, and you'd be on the back foot, wouldn't you? If you're trying to justify lack of success, but you haven't got a structure to the process, I don't see how you can operate.
Mm. So the way that you've described this, it seems blindingly obvious. Clearly this is much more likely to deliver the outcome that organizations and the people in them want. But it also strikes me that there's a huge gulf, or potentially a huge gulf, between getting buy-in within an organization and actually executing this. So how can organizations and the people in them ensure that everybody's aligned behind this view and way of doing things? Because it strikes me that so often what we see is people are being, effectively, a good metaphor for this is people are being clocked in and out, but they're also being measured on results. You can't have it both ways. Either you want me to achieve what you want me to achieve, or you want me to work 8 hours a day, but you can't say you need to work 8 hours a day and achieve this, because if you don't achieve this, you're fired. But if you work 8 hours a day and you don't achieve this, you're still fired. So you've got to pick your measurement criteria, haven't you? So, like, how are you going to align people behind this?
On the internal, on the supplier side, you mean?
Yeah. So I'm trying to sell to your company, and I'm trying to enforce this as a way of doing things within the business, but not everybody is behind this idea. Lots of people are still driving based on the old metrics or the old way of doing things, or these things that, as we've said, don't work anymore. I'll send 1,000 emails. I'll send 5,000 emails. I'll make 1,000 cold calls.
Yeah, and your point around I guess if people aren't delivering, then they go, what are they doing? So this is what's happening now. There seems to have been a shift in the industry and linked to we aren't meeting our goals. So what are people doing? How many emails are they sending? How many meetings are they having? What else are they doing in between? So that is a trend that I'm seeing as well, I think, across the market, and the software that now is being deployed to capture that. I guess it's down to the results that you see, and we talked about the end result, which is the success. But if you've got the small wins along the way, those conversations that are happening, those tidbits of information that are coming, that confidence that has been built through those conversations, and you'd have to just articulate that those are the small wins that are the breadcrumbs to the success, I suppose. But if people on the other side are just basically blasting the emails and nothing's happening, and if people need to do what works, don't they? And I think so. If in the two scenarios you're describing, if there's one where they're doing the traditional, the most common practice way, which isn't working, and you're approaching it in a bit more sophisticated, methodical, strategic way, and articulating the successes, then I think that will gain support. But again, it has to result in success, doesn't it? So
yeah, I mean, we have had. I certainly have spoken to a number of salespeople, not a large number, but a number of salespeople that are high performers. So they are exceeding their number, but they are being vilified internally for not sending enough emails, going to enough events.
Oh, right, yeah.
So it's like, okay, so whatever you're doing is working. It's working for you. It's working for your clients, or it should be working for everybody. Yet the KPIs that are so ingrained in the organization as measurement of sales process that aren't working, you're not achieving those. Now, a sensible leader would say, well, we need to throw away the rule book because actually what this person's doing is delivering the results that we need. But they're not. They're punishing that person for investing their time not in those granular tasks, but in things that are clearly working.
This is a real pet peeve for me. I'm not in sales ops. I am a salesperson myself, so I feel that person's pain, and I think there needs to be a complete rejection of that, in my opinion. But I'm not sure that's the way the trend in the market's going, to be perfectly honest.
No, and that's a really worrying concern, isn't it? I remember that Tim cracked a joke about this ages ago, and I wrote a blog about this the other day. And he said that you need to be really careful about what you measure. He said most high-performing salespeople drive a Porsche. Therefore, if you buy a Porsche, you'll be a high-performing salesperson, which is obviously a ludicrous thing to think. However, that's a lot of what we're seeing. So I had a little bit of a spat with somebody on LinkedIn in the comments the other day when they were saying about this is what you need to do with these new tools that are available, because 20% of or 90% of top performers do this thing. Yep, but that's 90% of top performers buy a Porsche, so go and buy a Porsche. It's the same thing, isn't it? Where actually what you need is a robust behavioral change rather than simply the application of a tool.
Yeah, and I think this is going to keep us thinkers busy for definitely the rest of our career, because there isn't an easy answer, is there? So I don't think it's down to metrics. I think this is a question of, look, if it's not working, what are you doing? I can understand that. But then maybe the metrics that they're suggesting won't necessarily work either. So I think this, like we keep hearing about, AI is going to change everything, and I think it will, but not in the way people think. I think it's going to it is going to make the traditional role obsolete. You see a lot of trends in, especially with the big box firms that are moving to much younger, more inexperienced salespeople, I'd say. So that's because they're cheaper. So that will then, with the sales process, and they're betting big on that. But that is a shift more towards transactional sales. They know what the clients know what they want, so they're going to come in, and it's more just managing them through that sales process. So it's going to be tough.
Indeed, it is. But interesting times ahead. So, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. It's been absolutely fantastic having you as part of the show. It's been brilliant you sharing your insights, and I love the fact that this is data-backed research, your findings, rather than just an opinion. Because let's be honest, everybody's got an opinion on stuff.
So what's the name of your book, Ryan?
It's Building B2B Relationships: How to Identify, Map, and Develop Key Stakeholder Relationships.
And it's the green thing on the back there.
Correct, yeah.
And where can we get copies?
I think Amazon's the easiest place for global audiences, or the Kogan Page website, slightly cheaper there. But if you want Kindle, things like that, go to Amazon.
Okay, thank you.
So where can people get in touch with you and learn more about what it is that you do?
LinkedIn, I think, is the easiest thing for me. I don't have too many other channels, so I'm always happy to chat and connect on LinkedIn and discuss further one-to-one as well. This is a topic close to my heart, and it's been a pleasure to spend the last hour chatting through with you guys.
Thank you very much indeed. So you can visit the digitaldownload.live/newsletter to subscribe to our newsletter. Normally Bertrand, that chairs the show, would put up a QR code now and let you scan that, but I unfortunately don't have the QR code, hence the fact that it'll be better next week when Bertrand is back. So from our panelists, thank you very much indeed. From everyone in the audience, thank you very much indeed, and we'll look